You think you know how good Michael Jordan was. You don't. Not even close. Because the numbers he put up don't belong to a basketball player. They belong to a cheat code someone forgot to patch out of reality. Michael Jordan averaged 30.1 points per game across his entire career. Not a single season. His entire career. That is the highest scoring average in NBA history, and nobody else is within 2 full points. He won 10 scoring titles. Wilt Chamberlain is the only other human to win more than 4. Jordan won 5 MVPs. He won 6 championships. He won 6 finals MVPs every single time he reached the finals. He was named the most valuable player of the series. He never needed a Game 7. Think about that. 6 trips to the biggest stage in basketball, and he never once let it go the distance. He went 6 for 6 with a perfect record and never broke a sweat in a deciding game. His playoff scoring average was 33.4 points per game, somehow even higher than his regular season number. While most players shrink under pressure, Jordan grew. He had the highest usage rate in finals history, while simultaneously shooting over 50% from the field in 4 of those 6 championship runs. He made 9 all-defensive first teams. Because scoring 40 on you wasn't enough, he wanted to lock you up on the other end too. Coaches designed entire defensive schemes around one man, and it didn't matter. Teams sold out to stop him, and he averaged 37 in a playoff series anyway. He once dropped 63 points on the 1986 Boston Celtics, a team many consider the greatest ever assembled, and Larry Bird walked off the court and told the media, "That was God disguised as Michael Jordan. That wasn't a fan. That was Larry Legend, shaking his head in surrender." So how good was Michael Jordan actually? And is he really the greatest to ever play the game of basketball? Michael Jeffrey Jordan was born on February 17, 1963, in Brooklyn, New York, the 4th of 5 children born to James and Dolores Jordan. His father was a General Electric plant supervisor, and his mother worked at a bank. There was no basketball bloodline, no 7-foot father, no mother who played college ball. The Jordans were a working-class family who moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, when Michael was a toddler, and basketball was just something the neighborhood kids did to kill time. As a child, Michael was competitive to a degree that bordered on pathological. He and his older brother Larry would go to war in their backyard on a dirt court their father had built, and those games were vicious elbows, trash talk, and a younger Michael who simply could not stand losing to anyone, let alone his brother. Larry was actually the better athlete for most of their childhood. He was stockier, more explosive, and he had a vertical leap that the family swears rivaled Michael's. But Larry Jordan topped out at 5 feet 8. Michael, he kept growing. Here's the part nobody expected. When Michael tried out for the varsity basketball team at Emsley A. Laney High School as a sophomore, he didn't make it. The coach, Clifton "Pop" Herring, put him on the junior varsity squad instead. A 5'10" sophomore who was still growing into his body, who wasn't the best player on his own JV team, got cut from varsity. The future greatest basketball player ever born was told he wasn't good enough. That rejection rewired something inside him. Jordan later said it was the single most important moment of his competitive life. Not a championship, not an MVP, but a high school coach telling him no. He spent that summer in the gym every single morning before anyone else arrived. He grew 4 inches between his sophomore and junior year, suddenly standing 6 feet 3 with hands that could palm a basketball like a tennis ball, and a first step that left defenders reaching at air. By his junior year, he was the best player on the varsity team. By his senior year, he was averaging more than 25 points per game, earning McDonald's All-American honors and being recruited by every major program in the country. The skinny kid who got cut had become something else entirely, and the transformation had only just begun. Michael Jordan chose the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he chose it because of one man, Dean Smith. Smith was the father of structured basketball, a tactician who believed in team play over individual heroics, discipline over flash, and winning the right way. For a player with Jordan's volcanic competitive fire, it was the perfect leash. Smith wouldn't let his freshmen freelance, wouldn't let them play hero ball, and wouldn't let the spotlight ruin them. Jordan had to learn how to fit inside a system, and it drove him crazy, but it also built the foundation of a winner. His freshman season stats were modest by the standards of what he'd become. 13.5 points per game, shooting over 50% from the floor. Good, not transcendent. The Tar Heels were stacked with talent, and Jordan was just one piece of the puzzle until he wasn't. March 29, 1982, the NCAA championship game. North Carolina versus Georgetown, led by a young Patrick Ewing, already the most dominant defensive presence in college basketball. The game is tight. Georgetown leads by 1 with under 20 seconds to play. Dean Smith calls a timeout. The play is designed for Jordan, a 17-year-old freshman with ice in his veins and no business taking the biggest shot of the season. The ball swings to the left wing. Jordan catches it. He rises. The shot is pure. It rattles in. North Carolina wins the national championship, and the kid who got cut from his high school varsity team just hit the most famous shot of the college basketball season. Years later, Jordan said, "That shot gave me the confidence I could perform when everything was on the line. After that, I was never afraid of the moment again." He stayed at Carolina for 2 more seasons, winning ACC Player of the Year, making consensus All-American, and refining his mid-range game under Smith's system. But scouts still had their doubts. He wasn't a point guard. He wasn't a true shooting guard in the traditional mold. He was 6'6" with a ridiculous wingspan and an uncoachable desire to destroy opponents. But could that translate to the professional level? The 1984 draft was loaded with centers, and conventional wisdom said big men won championships. Houston took Hakeem Olajuwon first overall. Portland took Sam Bowie second, desperate for a center. Michael Jordan fell to the Chicago Bulls at the 3rd pick. Portland passed on Michael Jordan for a 7-foot center who averaged 14 and 7. It is, without exaggeration, the worst draft decision in the history of professional sports. Chicago in 1984 was a basketball wasteland. The Bulls had won more than 30 games just once in the previous 4 seasons. The franchise was irrelevant. The city had the Bears, the Cubs, and the Blackhawks. Nobody cared about the Bulls. Michael Jordan changed that in about 2 weeks. He averaged 28.2 points per game as a rookie, 3rd in the entire league behind only Bernard King and Larry Bird. He was named to the All-Star team. He won Rookie of the Year in a landslide. But the raw stats don't capture what it felt like to watch him. He moved differently than other players. He would take off from the free throw line and hang in the air so long that defenders on the ground would land before he did. His hands were enormous. His tongue stuck out on every drive like a predator tasting the air. He would switch the ball from his right hand to his left hand in mid-flight, contorting his body around shot blockers in ways that defied physics. Kevin Lawfrey, his first professional coach, said after one of Jordan's early games, "I've been in this league for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like him. He does things in the air that shouldn't be possible." The league noticed immediately. Attendance spiked on the road whenever the Bulls came to town. People weren't coming to see the Bulls, they were coming to see him. He was an event, a spectacle, a one-man circus that happened to also be the most ruthlessly efficient scorer anyone had ever seen. But here was the problem. The Bulls were terrible. Jordan could score 40 on any given night, and Chicago would still lose because the supporting cast was a collection of journeymen and spare parts. In his 2nd season, he broke a bone in his foot and missed 64 games. When he came back for the playoffs, the Bulls drew the Boston Celtics in the 1st round, a 67-win juggernaut with Bird, McHale, and Parrish. Jordan dropped 49 in Game 1. Then he dropped 63 in Game 2, still the most points ever scored in a playoff game. The Bulls lost. They were swept. And Bird made his legendary proclamation about God and basketball sneakers. Jordan could do anything except win. The Detroit Pistons became his wall. For 3 straight years, from 1988 to 1990, the Pistons eliminated the Bulls from the playoffs using a defensive strategy so brutal it had its own name, the Jordan Rules. Every time Michael drove to the basket, 2 or 3 Pistons would foul him hard. Bill Laimbeer set bone-jarring screens. Dennis Rodman bodied him on every possession. Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars took turns hounding him on the perimeter. The message was simple: you can score, but we will beat you down, and you cannot beat us alone. And they were right. Jordan would score 35 and lose. He'd score 40 and lose. He'd play all 48 minutes and lose. The media started asking the question that haunted him. Can Michael Jordan win a championship, or is he just a one-man show? It was the only insult that could reach him, and it cut deep. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened because of a man named Phil Jackson and a system called the triangle offense. Jackson arrived as head coach before the 1989-90 season, but it took a full year before the philosophy sank in. The triangle offense was the opposite of everything Jordan had done. Instead of Michael holding the ball and creating from isolation, the system demanded constant movement, passing, reading the defense, and trusting your teammates to make plays. Jordan hated it at first. Why would he pass to Horace Grant when he could score over anyone alive? Tex Winter, Jackson's assistant and the architect of the triangle, had a simple answer: because you keep losing. The other piece of the puzzle arrived in the 1987 draft, but he didn't become the piece until years later. Scottie Pippen was a gangly, raw, small forward from the University of Central Arkansas, not exactly a basketball powerhouse, and he needed time to develop. By 1990, Pippen had evolved into one of the most versatile defenders and playmakers in the sport. He could guard all 5 positions. He could run the fast break, he could post up, shoot threes, and facilitate the offense when Jordan sat down. He was the perfect complement, a superstar caliber player who was willing to be the second option because he understood that winning with Jordan was better than losing as the man. Horace Grant provided toughness and rebounding. John Paxson and B.J. Armstrong gave them floor spacing and shooting. But the real change was inside Jordan's head. Phil Jackson had introduced the team to mindfulness and meditation. He gave them books to read. He told Jordan directly that his greatness was actually holding the team back because nobody else was allowed to grow in his shadow. It was the hardest thing anyone had ever said to him, and it was true. In the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls faced the Pistons again. The same team that had tortured Jordan for 3 years. The same Jordan rules. The same bruising, physical warfare. But this time, something was different. Jordan didn't try to beat them alone. He moved the ball, he found Pippen on the wing, he set screens for Paxson, he trusted the triangle. The Pistons' defense, designed to stop one man, had no answer for a team. Chicago swept Detroit in 4 games. It wasn't even close. The Pistons were so humiliated that Isaiah Thomas and several players walked off the court before the final buzzer without shaking hands. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The wall had finally crumbled, and everything on the other side was about to belong to him. The 1991 NBA Finals pitted the Bulls against Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers, a dream matchup that the sports world had been craving. Magic was the king. The Lakers were the glamour franchise. They had won 5 championships in the 80s and had the pedigree, the mystique, and the confidence of a team that had been here before. Jordan had none of that. He had 0 finals appearances, 0 rings, 0 proof that he could close it out on the biggest stage. Game 1, the Bulls win at home. Game 2, and this is where the legend is born. Jordan drives to the basket, elevates for a right-handed layup, sees Sam Perkins rotating over to block it, and switches the ball to his left hand in midair, scooping it up and in off the glass. The camera catches him shrugging in disbelief at his own move. Marv Albert loses his mind on the broadcast. It is one of the 5 most iconic plays in NBA history, and it happened in a finals game under the brightest lights. The Lakers fought. They took Game 1 at home to make it 2-1 Chicago. But the Bulls won the next 3, clinching the series in 5 games. Jordan collapsed on the court, holding the championship trophy, tears streaming down his face, sobbing into the gold surface. He later said, "I never showed that emotion in public before, but I'd waited 7 years. 7 years of hearing, I couldn't do it, and I finally did." The repeat in 1992 was ruthless. The Bulls stormed through the regular season with 67 wins and tore through the playoffs, losing only 3 games before meeting the Portland Trail Blazers in the finals. Game 1 became the shrug game. Jordan hit 6 three-pointers in the first half, a performance so absurd, so outside his normal game, that even he couldn't believe it. After the 6th-3, he turned to the broadcast table and shrugged, palms up, as if to say, "I don't know what's happening either." He scored 35 in that first half alone. Portland never recovered psychologically. The Bulls won in 6 games, and Jordan claimed his 2nd consecutive Finals MVP. But the 3rd championship, in 1993, was the masterpiece. The opponent was Charles Barkley's Phoenix Suns, a 62-win powerhouse led by the reigning MVP. Barkley was playing out of his mind, dragging the Suns through the Western Conference by sheer will and force. The media had built the narrative. Barkley was the MVP, the most dominant force in basketball that season, and this was supposed to be his coronation. Jordan took that personally. He averaged 41 points per game in the finals. 41. In the 6 games of that series, he scored 55 in Game 4, a performance so suffocating that Barkley, one of the most confident men alive, looked defeated on the bench. The Bulls won in 6. Jordan had his 3rd straight title, his 3rd straight Finals MVP, and had played arguably the single greatest final series in the history of the sport. 3 championships in 3 years. A three-peat, the first since the 1966 Celtics. And Jordan was the undisputed best player on the planet. Then he walked away. In October of 1993, Michael Jordan retired from basketball to play professional baseball. The reasons were complex: the murder of his father, exhaustion, gambling scrutiny, and a desire to fulfill a dream his father had always had for him. He spent a season and a half playing minor league baseball for the Birmingham Barons, hitting .262 with 3 home runs and 30 stolen bases. He was mediocre at best. The world's greatest basketball player was riding buses through the Southern League, eating fast food, and striking out against pitchers who would never sniff the majors. It was humbling and beautiful and strange, but the itch never left. On March 18, 1995, 2 words changed the sports world. I'm back. Jordan returned to the Bulls for the final 17 games of the regular season. He was rusty. In his 5th game back, he played the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden and dropped 55 points. Rusty, apparently, is a relative term when you're Michael Jordan. But the Bulls fell to the Orlando Magic in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway's young squad outmuscled a Chicago team that wasn't yet whole. Nick Anderson stole the ball from Jordan in the final seconds of Game 1, a play that became a symbol of vulnerability. Jordan walked off the court knowing he had work to do. That summer, something shifted. Jordan trained with a fury that his teammates described as terrifying. He added 15 pounds of muscle. He refined his postgame, adding a fadeaway jumper that would become the most unstoppable weapon in basketball history, because you cannot block a shot from a player who is falling away from you. The 1995-96 Bulls became the greatest regular season team ever assembled. 72 wins, 10 losses. Dennis Rodman had arrived to provide rebounding, chaos, and defense. Pippen was at the peak of his powers. Tony Kukoc came off the bench like a 6th starter. Ron Harper and Steve Kerr rounded out a roster with no weaknesses. The playoff run was a march. They lost a total of 3 games across 4 rounds. In the finals, the Seattle Supersonics, led by Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp, pushed them to 6 games, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Jordan won his 4th championship, his 4th Finals MVP, and the regular season MVP, completing one of the most dominant individual seasons any athlete in any sport has ever produced. The 1997 Finals against the Utah Jazz produced perhaps the single most iconic Jordan moment of all. Game 5. Jordan has the flu or food poisoning, depending on who you ask. He's been up all night, vomiting. He can barely stand during warm-ups. Scottie Pippen later said Jordan looked like a dead man walking. The Jazz lead the series 2-2. This is an elimination-level game in all but name. Jordan plays 44 minutes. He scores 38 points. He hits the go-ahead three-pointer with under a minute left, then stumbles into Pippen's arms, barely able to stand. The camera captures his gray face, his hollow eyes, his body screaming at him to stop, and him refusing. The Bulls win. They clinch the series in 6. It is called the flu game, and it is the single most referenced example of athletic willpower in basketball history. His former rival, Isaiah Thomas, a man who had spent years trying to destroy Jordan on the court, said years later, "That flu game told me everything. He wasn't just the most talented, he was the toughest." The 6th and final championship came in 1998 against the same Utah Jazz. Game 6, the Bulls trail by 3, with under a minute to play. Jordan steals the ball from Karl Malone in the post, a play so audacious that Malone, one of the strongest men in the league, looked like he'd been pickpocketed by a ghost. Jordan pushes the ball up the floor. The clock is under 10 seconds. He sizes up Bryon Russell at the top of the key. 1 dribble left. A crossover. Russell slips or is pushed, depending on your loyalty. Jordan pulls up for a 20-foot jumper. The ball arcs through the air. Nothing but net. The Bulls win their 6th championship. Jordan holds his follow-through, his arm extended, frozen in time. It is the most famous shot in basketball history, and it was the last shot Michael Jordan ever took as a Chicago Bull. 6 rings, 6 finals MVPs, 0 Game 7s, the most perfect ending any athlete has ever written. On July 23, 1993, James Jordan, Michael's father, was murdered. He had pulled over on a highway in North Carolina to take a nap and was shot by 2 18-year-old carjackers. The body wasn't identified for weeks. When it finally was, the news shattered Michael in a way that basketball never could. James Jordan was more than Michael's father. He was his best friend, his loudest cheerleader, the man who built that backyard court and told his son to never stop competing. Michael had dedicated championships to him from the court. He'd looked for his face in the stands after every big moment, and now that face was gone. The timing was cruel. Jordan had just completed the three-peat, the greatest sustained run of dominance the league had ever seen. He should have been on top of the world. Instead, he was a 30-year-old man burying his father and questioning whether any of it mattered. His retirement from basketball weeks later was directly tied to his grief. Playing baseball wasn't a whim, it was a pilgrimage. James Jordan had always wanted Michael to be a baseball player, had dreamed of watching his son play America's pastime. So Michael picked up a bat and tried to honor a dead man's wish. He later said, "I was trying to find my father again through the game he loved. I know that sounds strange, but when I was on that baseball diamond, I felt closer to him than I did anywhere else." When he returned to basketball in 1995, the fire was different. It wasn't about proving doubters wrong anymore. It was about legacy, about making sure that every second of greatness counted, because he understood, for the first time, that time is finite and stolen without warning. The second three-peat wasn't built on talent alone. It was built on grief, transformed into purpose. The 1998 championship should have been the beginning of another run. Jordan was 35, still the best player in basketball, and the Bulls had the infrastructure to compete. But Jerry Krause, the Bulls' general manager, had decided it was time to rebuild. He told Phil Jackson that 1998 would be his last season regardless of the outcome, a decision so baffling that Jordan called it a travesty. Scottie Pippen was traded to Houston. Dennis Rodman was let go. Jackson walked away. The dynasty was dismantled not by a rival team or by age, but by an executive who believed he was bigger than the players. Jordan retired for the second time. He spent 3 years away from the game, taking partial ownership of the Washington Wizards and working in the front office. But the competitor inside him never went quiet. In 2001, at age 38, Jordan came back to play for the Wizards. He wasn't the same player. The knees were slower. The explosiveness that once let him fly was grounded by gravity and time. But even a diminished Jordan averaged 22.9 points per game in his first season back, a number that most players in the league would kill for at their peak. He played 2 seasons in Washington. There were flashes of 43-point game against the New Jersey Nets at age 40 that reminded everyone what he'd been, but the Wizards never made the playoffs. It wasn't the ending the story deserved. His true final act had already been written in Utah, with that last shot hanging in the air. Everything after was an epilogue. On April 16, 2003, Michael Jordan played his last NBA game. The standing ovation at the First Union Center in Philadelphia lasted 3.5 minutes. Players from both teams stood and applauded. The crowd chanted his name. He finished with 15 points, and when he walked off the court for the final time, an era ended. Step back for a moment and consider the full arc. A kid from Wilmington, North Carolina, who got cut from his high school varsity team, who wasn't even the best player in his own family, who was passed over twice in the draft, that kid became the most famous athlete on the planet. Not the most famous basketball player, the most famous athlete, period. His impact on the sport was seismic. Before Jordan, the NBA was a league struggling with television ratings, public perception issues, and limited global reach. By the time he was done, the NBA was a worldwide cultural phenomenon. He didn't just play basketball, he turned it into entertainment, into fashion, into aspiration. The Jordan brand, a subsidiary of Nike, generates more revenue annually than most professional sports franchises. His Airness didn't just elevate himself, he elevated everyone around him. Scottie Pippen went from a small school unknown to a top 50 all-time player because Jordan demanded excellence from every teammate. Steve Kerr became a champion because Jordan trusted him with the biggest shot of the 1997 finals. Even his enemies grew from the rivalry, the Pistons' bad boy era, Patrick Ewing's legendary career, the Utah Jazz's place in history. All of them are defined in part by their war with Jordan. For 15 professional seasons, minus the baseball detour and the Washington years, Michael Jordan was the undisputed best basketball player alive. He won 6 championships in 8 full seasons of trying, never losing in the finals, never needing a 7th game, and winning the finals MVP every single time. Only a handful of athletes in any sport have sustained that level of dominance across an entire decade. The names are short: Gretzky in hockey, Serena in tennis, Pele in football, Bradman in cricket. Jordan sits among them not because of volume, but because of perfection. He was never beaten on the biggest stage. The conversation about the greatest basketball player of all time has exactly 4 serious candidates, and each one deserves genuine respect before any verdict is rendered. LeBron James has the longevity argument. 21 seasons of elite play, 4 championships with 3 different franchises, all-time leading scorer, and a statistical profile that covers every category on the stat sheet. LeBron is the most complete basketball player who has ever lived in terms of pure versatility. He can play and guard all 5 positions, and his cumulative numbers are staggering. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated for 2 full decades, with the most unblockable weapon in basketball history, the skyhook. 6 championships, 6 MVPs, and the all-time scoring record that stood for nearly 4 decades. His sustained excellence across eras is almost unmatched. Bill Russell won 11 championships in 13 seasons, and invented the concept of defensive dominance in professional basketball. 11 rings. The argument practically makes itself. Each of these men changed the sport. Each of them has a legitimate case. But the case for Jordan rests on something none of them can match: the combination of peak dominance and flawlessness in the moments that matter most. LeBron has 4 championships, but also 6 finals losses, including a 2011 performance against Dallas that even his greatest admirers struggled to defend. Kareem won 6 titles, but was the clear best player in only 2 or 3 of those runs, benefiting enormously from Magic Johnson's arrival. Russell's 11 rings came in an 8-team league, where the talent pool was a fraction of what Jordan faced. Jordan went 6 for 6 in the finals. He never had a bad final series. He never disappeared in a big moment. He won every closeout game. He was named Finals MVP every single time. His playoff scoring average, 33.4, is the highest in history by a wide margin. He won Defensive Player of the Year, something none of the other candidates accomplished. He led the league in scoring and made the all-defensive team simultaneously for 7 consecutive seasons, an absurd combination of offensive and defensive dominance that nobody has replicated. The argument against Jordan is that he played in an era before modern analytics, that the league was less global, that his competition in the finals was weaker than what LeBron faced. These are fair points, but when you strip it all away and ask the simple question, who would you want taking the last shot with everything on the line, there is only one answer: 6 for 6, 0 doubt, the greatest of all time. Michael Jordan didn't just play basketball. He bent the sport around himself until it looked like something that had been invented specifically for him to dominate. From a dirt court in Wilmington to the summit of athletic achievement, his arc is the standard against which every champion is measured and every pretender falls short. A boy who got cut became the man who could not be stopped. If you want to know how a team was built to be unbeatable, check out our deep dive into the 1996 Chicago Bulls, the greatest team ever assembled.